Hi, I'm Dan Kubisky, co-chair of the Society of Professional Journalists International Community. Last week, Mongolian journalist Sun Singh Naran lost her appeal to a verdict that could put her in prison for more than 4 years because of a Facebook posting. She is known as a bit of a gadfly in Mongolia, having previously uncovered sexual abuse in a Buddhist boarding school and questioning companies that defaulted on loans from the National Development Bank. Now, Mongolia has been successful in its efforts to establish a viable democracy since 1990. Freedom House gives it a high mark for its press freedom. However, there are issues of self censorship and fear of costly libel suits. To give us a brief rundown on the latest from Mongolia, we are happy to once again welcome back Duuya Baatar, founder of NEST Mongolia, a fact checking organization affiliated with the International Fact Checking Network. Duuya, it's good to see you again, and thank you for taking time to talk with us today. Um, First,
Yeah, thanks for having me.
can you give us an update on the case?
Yeah, so November 7th was the day of the appeals hearing. And as you've mentioned, journalist Onur Tisik has lost the appeals verdict, and the court upheld its previous decision of imprisonment for 4 years and 9 months in prison. So we do think there are a number of layers to uncover that are related to this case. This is really an unprecedented event that's happening in Mongolia related to Mongolian journalism industry. And we have reasons to believe that this has a very dangerous, might have a very dangerous ripple effect in the journalism industry. First of all, there's going to be the chilling effect, which we are already seeing. Onur Titik's case is by far the biggest case that is in this format, but we do see smaller cases that journalists are facing related to the coverages that they make. Um, the dissemination of false information is only one of five charges that are posed against her. To name the other five charges, tax evasion, disclosure of personal information, illegal acquisition of state secrets, money laundering, and spreading false information. So these are the five charges that are posed against her. And she was detained even before she was sentenced in July this year. She was first initially detained in December 2023 for 68 days before she was released in February this year. And then she was sentenced in July on the five charges for 4 years and 9 months. She went on a hunger strike once. Prior to the appeals hearing, requesting transparency in the court procedure, but that didn't happen, and the criminal court of the capital city issued a statement saying because her cases include matters that relate to secrets, that the court hearing is not able to be open at all because out of the five cases, it includes state secrets. And when it includes state secrets, it kind of requires top level of secrecy. Sorry about the choice of word, but it has to be held behind closed doors. And when that is included in a number of cases that can be open or transparent. The court is required to uphold the highest level of confidentiality when they're doing the court hearing. So that's the reason that they kind of quoted or in their statement for not doing the court hearing in a transparent way. Again, the other thing is I'm not really prepared or do not have enough information to talk about whether the allegations against her is correct or not. But the thing that worries us the most is how the court hearings took place. And the fact that at this stage, even when I'm talking to you, I don't have enough information to comment on this case because even the lawyer of Onur Tütük is not able to disclose much information about the case because he's obliged by law not to disclose information to the public. So that's the thing that worries us the most. And we do think this can be a beginning of a number or a series of practices that could kind of hinder press freedom in Mongolia. What's stated in the law on paper is one thing, but how those are carried out in practice in real life is something that's even more worrying than we see.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I mean, it seems in a lot of countries they use tax evasion, state secrets as an excuse to get at journalists. Is this something that you're seeing on a larger scale happening in Mongolia? Um, and well, let's talk about that first. Is this what you're seeing as something expanding and more of a threat to press freedom using these arguments?
Well, if we look at the official data, then annually, um, around 10 journalists um, get support from pro bono lawyers on cases similar to that. In number, that doesn't seem as much, right? But out of this official count or data, the journalists who are basically just saying, okay, we did something wrong, it's our fault, we'll just get fined and keep on doing what we're doing, are way more. And we don't count that. So that's something that worries us. Tax evasion is kind of a trend that we're seeing, and when you open a case against a journalist saying um, he or she disseminated false information, which is legally forbidden in the criminal law, then it opens up the possibility for lawmakers to really dig into all the accounts that you have. And journalism organizations or media organizations are not the best in company governance, financial reporting, and things like that anyway. And because I mean, due to cost and professionalism, and also, I mean, basically, if you're a good journalist, then you become the CEO, and then you're accountable for your financial reporting. So that makes media organizations quite vulnerable to that. And we are, as a precautionary measure, Nest Center is also implementing projects to help media organizations get a better hold of their financial accounts, internal governance, and things like that, as well as introducing the JTI standards for Mongolian organizations and helping them in their onboarding process and things like that. So those are precautionary measures because we know that even though there may be errors, it's not intentional. It's just because they lack the expertise and capacity. And I do not kind of I would not be able to say that media organizations do not have that kind of irregularities, but um, I mean, those should not be reasons to imprison journalists. Another more common way of basically censoring journalists is using social media to decrease their credibility. So if a
Mm.
journalist, especially female journalists, and most of them are actually female in Mongolia, um, uncover a story about you, you would employ a troll army to basically attack that journalist about her personal life or what she wears or what she doesn't wear, how she looks, and things like that. So that has proven to be a much more effective way to censor journalists. And basically, I mean, it's also pretty fail-safe way because you're not, from the international perspective, you mentioned how Mongolia is rated by the Freedom House. It doesn't affect those ratings, right?
Mm.
It doesn't affect those good reputation that Mongolia has, but it's like very covert operation that actually pays off. So we have also been trying to work with some journalists because of our fact-checking work. We do have the expertise to do that, is trying to help journalists to track down the trajectory of those posts on social media that have been attacking that person and helping them understand that those attacks are not organic, are not real people who actually think she's ugly or something, right? And it's actually a coordinated action that is aimed at censoring her work. It really helps with the journalist's psychological condition and also continuing to work or continuing to do her work as well.
Well, we've seen attacks on journalists, and again, primarily female journalists, exactly as you're describing around the world. Uh, so, what are you besides offering journalists and journalism organizations and news organizations help and support to get their structure in order? Uh, are there other things that the journalism community in Mongolia and maybe even with assistance from outside organizations are doing in order to help uh, defend or support journalists, such as the case we're discussing, and the others who are facing either threats from the government or even just these trolls.
Um, so these, as you said, Mongolia has always been praised as an oasis for democracy. We until this year, when RSF's rating for press freedom in Mongolia has been decreased to, I mean, we fell from 88 to 109 this year, which is really kind of representative of the actual situation here in Mongolia that's changing. So this is actually kind of a new problem that's being presented to us. We got hints that the whole environment, the civic space might be shrinking when we first met, when we talked about the social media law that was passed in, was it 2020? I think it was 2023. Yeah,
That
January
sounds right.
2023. Yeah. Yeah. That's when we first got the hint, and we were kind of starting to brainstorm about it. And now we actually see, after Unertitik's case, that we have to be quite, I mean, we have to be better at playing this game. So the things that we are trying to do is first, we wanted to identify our gaps. So our legal knowledge is not up to par with the international standards or what's happening outside of Mongolia. So up to now, we only thought charges on disseminating disinformation or defamation or libel were charges against journalists. But as we are seeing now, in Mongolia as well as internationally, tax evasion, like other things, money laundering, espionage, these things are also being used against journalists, and we don't have enough lawyers who recognize that as a kind of a crackdown on press freedom. So, something that we are hoping to do, and we're actually working quite actively towards that, is working more closely with lawyers so that they basically take on defending press freedom as like a carrier. And we want to connect Mongolian lawyers to international lawyers who have expertise in working in these cases and basically training lawyers as well. So it might seem like not in our mandate to work with lawyers because we are a media support organization, but it just so happens that that's something that's really necessary for media organizations now to do. And it's a very important support. There have been cases in court where it was a perfectly press freedom defense case, but due to lack of expertise of the lawyer, the defendant or the journalist was sentenced or fined. And the fine amount is not too high, so journalists don't really make too much of it. And then, but there are consequences. You have a record as a criminal, right? At least. So they don't really recognize that. I mean, the most important thing is like financially, it doesn't really make them broke. So they kind of accept that and carry on. So working with lawyers is something that's really important. We have been doing kind of pilot versions of this support previously. Uh, for instance, we have a network called Facts First Mongolia, which kind of resembles the Facts First Philippines initiative that was initially started by Rappler. And in that, also following from Rappler, we included like a number of lawyers who would support the organizations who are members of the network if they faced any cases against the court. So as of now, there haven't been any case that went to the court, but during the election this year, there have been a number of cases where they got intimidation calls from authorities or police organizations saying, or not really saying much, but kind of actually like inviting them for interviews and things like that. So the lawyers advised the media organizations through that time, and whenever needed, they were able to follow them to the meetings, which was such a strong emotional support for the media organizations. So we want to really level that up and actually provide litigation support for journalists. So the official number, based on our research, says there's about 10 every year, but there's a lot more that's uncounted that doesn't get litigation support. So we want to really tap into those people and reach with our support. Yeah.
Okay, you talk about the law and the needing of lawyers, and I just want just one last item to talk about. I understand that there's a new press freedom law being debated. Could you tell us something about what the law is, and do you think it's a decent law from what you've been able to read so far?
Mhm. Okay, so everything that I have shared up to now are things that have started basically at the end of the previous parliament. So we have reasons to hope that the current parliament would do better to uphold human rights and freedom of the press. So hopefully this law will be one example of that. So the current press freedom law in Mongolia was passed in 1998. It has basically four parts. I mean, it basically says that the media organization is responsible for the truth, trustworthiness, and truth of the content that they are disseminating, and that the state is not allowed to pass any law that would censor press freedom, and also state is not allowed to own any media. So basically, that's it. So it's a very small law. Um, there have been a number of cases that journalists, for instance, requested a law that would guarantee their rights to protect their sources or not to disclose their sources, and other regulations that would reflect how information space have changed with the advance of technology. So we agree that there is a need to amend or pass a new press freedom law in Mongolia, and there have been, I think, at least three attempts up to now before facing public, basically scrutiny or um, not having enough political support. Three attempts to pass a new press freedom law, and that hasn't happened. And the reason we kind of hope that this will happen now is basically due to the lack of the current law to regulate the existing environment, and also the current parliament saying that they want to be a parliament that upholds human rights, and they want to kind of build it as their kind of advantage over previous parliaments. And this parliament has the most number of people, members, because we have amended our constitution ahead of the last election. Now we have 126 members, as opposed to 76 before. We have more younger members, and also more party representation as opposed to just three in the past. Now we have, I think, four parties in the parliament, which is rather more balanced than the previous 4 years, I would say. Um, so, looking at the law, personally, my first reaction was I wasn't really satisfied with what it said, because it had a number of media or journalism ethical standards or principles as clauses or regulations stated in the law. So, for instance, like for our ethical principles, if we make an ethical mistake, this seemed to me like that would be a legal kind of charge against me or our organization. So that was the main reason I was pretty concerned about this, but I did send it to a number of our friends and legal organizations who know better about the press freedom regulations around the world. So basically, the common answer that I've been getting is this law can be improved. There are a lot of things that can be improved, but overall, that they can feel this law has a good intention. So that's kind of a good message for me as well. So it kind of puts us as a civil society organization in a position where we can probably safely sit behind the table with the lawmakers and discuss our ideas,
Mhm.
submit our ideas on how to improve the current proposed regulation. Or it's not proposed yet; it's only drafted. Um, and maybe expect an equal level of collaboration. So yeah, we have reasons to be optimistic despite
Yeah.
the not so bright things that I have just
Right.
shared at the
Well,
beginning of this.
I tell you, just from looking at press freedom laws around the world in different countries, no journalist is ever happy with the laws, but it's always let's get what we can today and we'll try to get more tomorrow. Is that kind of
Mm.
part of the way you're looking at this as well?
Yeah, well, the way I'm looking at it is it shouldn't like decrease the level of freedom or it shouldn't deteriorate the current state with this law. So, for instance, by including ethical principles as in the law, which is kind of, they say it's principle, but it kind of looks like a regulation. It kind of creates gray zones, right? So, like journalists, it could add on to the pressure on journalists. So,
Mm.
the way I'm looking at it, I'm not too optimistic about it as well, but at least it should make the current situation or environment for journalists better, more conducive, if not 100% more, at least like 30% more better, right? So that's kind of our expectation. I think everybody in the Mongolian civic space would agree with that as well. So, I mean, one thing that we're getting to understand is it's better than kind of working in a gray area than working in a closed area, right?
Mhm.
Then you can do at least something, you can keep on going. But if your working opportunities or environment is closed off, then basically you cannot do much.
Right.
Um, so I just hope that whatever regulation that comes in would not make the gray area a closed area. If anything, it should make it like more transparent and open,
Mhm.
but not the other way around. I mean, if we were to close it off, then let's not change anything yet.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Well, this is very exciting. I mean, I know Mongolia has been struggling for more than 30 years to build its democracy, and let's face it, you're in a pretty tough neighborhood
yeah,
for a democracy to survive, given your neighbors to the north and south. So,
yeah.
all the power, more power to you. And we would like to keep informed of what's going on with this law. And if there's anything we can say or do, from our side, please let us know. We'll try to be as supportive as we possibly can. Um, Granted, we're on the
Thank
other
you.
side of the world from you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we really appreciate your continued support. Thank you.
Okay, so, before we leave, though, I want to thank you first very much for taking time to so early in the morning for you to do this. I want to put in a plug for a detailed discussion we're going to have about what your organization does in terms of fact checking. Uh, January 14, 2025, the first program we'll be hosting by the international community in the new year. We will have a discussion with Duuya and the director of the International Fact Checking Network. We're going to talk about why fact checking is important and talk about some of the international coalitions and connections that are being made. If anybody is interested in signing up for it, you can go to spj.org, go to the calendar, look for January 14, and register. We really hope to see a lot of people there. And Duuya, thank you very much again for taking the time and bringing us up to date on the latest press freedom issues in Mongolia. Do you have any last thoughts or comments?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. As I've mentioned, we're not like experts in legal regulations, but we're trying hard to understand more and more on how we can defend press freedom. And I'm sorry if I butchered some of the legal terms and phrases, especially it's not easy speaking in English about legal regulations. So I apologize for that. And yeah, thank you so much for keeping Mongolia on the radar and always taking interest in what's happening here. And basically, if you look at the map from the Freedom House's 2024 Democracy Report, in Asia, you only have Mongolia, New Zealand, South Korea, Japan that are green. And we're feeling that it's changing, at least in Mongolia, and hopefully our work will help us really keep that green color on the map and yeah, continue to be the oasis of democracy. Thank you.
And our best wishes are with you as well for that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you again.